How to assure that the backing tracks that your band plays along with are consistent and level as you move from one song to the next. This is a question that a viewer submitted, and I appreciate the question, so thank you very much. If you have questions or topics that you would like me to address, please let me know in the comments below, and if it's something that I feel like I can speak on, I'll be happy to address the issue. So this question was, our band plays with some backing tracks on different songs, and the backing tracks don't always play back at the same level. One song will play back at a certain level, the next one's a different level, and that's a little bit jarring. And so can we use a compressor to smooth out those differences in level from one backing track to another? Well, yeah, I'll give you three possible solutions here that come off the top of my mind. You can use a compressor, sure. And if I was going to use a compressor to do that, I want the compressor to act as a overriding, slow-acting gain control to control the level of the song. I'm not really trying to do dynamic control like we usually do with compressors. And so to do that, I'm going to use some really long time constants. So an attack time, which would normally be like maybe 30 milliseconds, I'm going to crank that up to maybe 300 milliseconds or half a second. And then for the decay time, I'm also going to crank that way up to maybe a second or 2 seconds. So the compressor action is now real slow and sluggish, and it just slowly controls the level of the song rather than trying to get in there and control the dynamics. For compressor ratio, I'm going to set that to be pretty high, like 8 or 10 to 1. So I've got a lot of control, and that control is pretty slow. Then finally, for the threshold control, the level at which the compressor starts taking action, I'd play one of your backing tracks that is one of the quieter tracks. And as that track is playing, I would start cranking up the threshold control, or maybe cranking down the threshold control, so that you're getting about 2 or 3 dB of compression action on that quiet backing track. And then when you play one of the louder backing tracks, you should see more compressor gain reduction, which will try to hold those tracks closer to level between each other as you go from one to the next. So the key with the compressor is to use really slow attack and release times, a pretty high compression ratio, and a threshold that is kicking in compressor action on all of your backing tracks. And that should smooth out the level from one track to the next to the next. Now for another solution, I'm assuming your backing tracks are probably stored as MP3 files. And we've long had this issue when listening to playlists full of MP3 files where some tracks would play louder than others, and that was kind of jarring. And so there's a tool called MP3 Gain. And what this does is it scans through the file and determines the loudness of that file. And it stores that loudness as a value in the data header of the file. There's a header in the file that contains things like the artist name and track information and so forth. And up in that data, there's an optional tag called replay gain. And that replay gain tag is a number that indicates how loud that file is. And that's a signal to the player. So when the player plays back that file, it knows that it should bump the gain up or down by a certain number of dB so that file is played back at proper reference level. Now, of course, not all players or player softwares will respect and respond to the replay gain tag, but most will. And so one of the things you could do is you could get the MP3 gain utility or a similar utility. There's free utilities out there that will do this. And just update your MP3 files that contain your backing tracks to make sure that they have replay gain information stored in them. So when they're played back, they can be played back at consistent volume. And that's a great solution. It does nothing to the fidelity of your files. It doesn't change their dynamics or their sound in any way. It just puts a tag on the files as to how loud to turn up the volume when you play this one back, so they all play back at proper level. And the third approach that comes to my mind is a tool called WinLoud. And WinLoud is a front-end utility that works in conjunction with FFmpeg. And both WinLoud and FFmpeg are free to use, and you can download them off the internet. And these can be used to process your audio files and video files and do all sorts of transformative processes with them. But one of the things that FFmpeg can do is level and dynamic processing. And with the front end that is provided by WinLoud, it makes it pretty easy to do. And so you can have a collection of files in a folder and process them with WinLoud. And there are some parameters you can control in there, but WinLoud will scan through these files and produce a new output file that is level processed, both in terms of dynamics and output level. And it's a relatively smart compressor processor that corresponds to European broadcast standards and such. And so it's got the ability to do a lot of audio processing and level control without it being overly apparent audibly. So that's a great tool if you want to be able to process your files and get them up to the maximum punchy output level consistently through the files. So if you have backing tracks that have a lot of dynamics with some really loud parts and some really quiet parts, and you want to even that stuff out as well as bring the overall level up to maximum operating level, WinLoud is the tool. So there are 3 different approaches that you could use to take care of this situation. You could use a compressor with some pretty slow attack and release settings to even out those channels. You could use MP3 gain to set a tag in your files so that they're played back at proper gain relative to each other, assuming that your playback device respects those tags, and most of them do. Or you could use WinLoud to process your files to create a level processed, dynamic processed, punchy, loud output file that would be consistent with all the other ones you process in the same way. Well, there's a few ideas that you can explore. There's probably other ways of doing it as well. And I hope whichever method that you pursue works well for you to control the levels of your backing tracks so that they're consistent and easy to work with. I hope this episode was useful and informative to you. And if so, if you'd like to support the channel and make it easy to find these episodes again, I'd appreciate it if you'd do all those YouTube button clicky things like subscribe and hit the like on the video and hit that bell for notifications. And if you've got something to contribute to the conversation, feel free to contribute it down below. So thanks again for stopping by and watching this episode, and I hope that you choose to come by and watch another one soon.